I woke to a sound I couldn't immediately place, soft, deliberate, almost like someone dragging metal across wood. For a moment, I wondered if I was still dreaming, caught in that hazy drift between sleep and waking where everything feels slightly displaced. But then the noise came again, sharper this time,
What are we
and
gonna
something
do?
in my chest tightened. It wasn't the kind of sound you could
I don't
ignore.
know, but
It
we'll
demanded
figure it out
attention,
together.
an unanswered knock from the dark. My
When he
name is
left, I
Helen,
didn't know
and
what
I've
to
lived
do.
alone for nearly 7 years. Long enough to
understand, Mom.
recognize every creak in my home,
We're here for you.
every whisper of wind through the siding, every shift of the old floorboards. This sound didn't belong to any of them. It felt foreign, intrusive, and far too calculated to be accidental. I pushed myself upright, blinking at the dim outline of my bedroom. The hallway light flickered faintly under the door, as if someone had just walked past the switch, but hadn't turned it on. A cold draft brushed my ankles, carrying with it the faint scent of damp earth, like the door had been open recently. My breath caught. I never left it unlocked. For years, I'd convinced myself that the quiet life was safer, simpler. After my marriage fell apart, and after my daughter, Grace, drifted into a strained silence with me, solitude became both my shield and my punishment. I knew every shadow in this house, every memory embedded in its wallpaper, and none of them should have been moving at this hour. The sound came again, louder now, closer. A surge of adrenaline shot through me as I swung my legs off the bed. My mind raced through a dozen possibilities, none of them comforting. A break-in? A wild animal? A dream I hadn't fully escaped? But then I heard a voice. Not fully formed, just a hushed whisper, too low to understand. For a heartbeat, I wondered if grief was playing tricks on me again. But the whisper was followed by movement, heavy and intentional, right outside my bedroom door. I stood frozen, my hand hovering over the doorknob. Something told me I shouldn't open it. Not yet. Not without understanding what waited on the other side. The silence stretched thick and suffocating until the knob trembled once. Just once, as if someone on the other side was deciding whether to turn it. In that moment, a truth settled into my bones. Whatever was happening tonight wasn't random. It wasn't a mistake. It was the beginning of something I had unknowingly invited years ago, something that had finally found its way back to me. And as the knob steadied again, I realized I no longer had the luxury of pretending the past was buried. Not when it was standing right outside my door did I use to believe that my life, though imperfect, was built on foundations I could trust. My daughter, Elena, had always been the steady one, quiet, observant, someone who carried her emotions like fragile glass she was afraid to drop. Her husband, Daniel, was her opposite in almost every way. Confident to a fault, always speaking as though he expected the room to bend around him. I never disliked him, but something inside me tightened whenever he entered a space. Not because of anything he said, but because of what he didn't. His silences always felt strategic. Before that night, the last time I saw them together was at a strained family dinner 2 months earlier. Elena barely touched her food, her eyes shadowed with something heavier than exhaustion. Daniel dominated the conversation, offering polished smiles that didn't quite reach his eyes. When they left, Elena hugged me a little too tightly, as if she wanted to say something but couldn't make the words behave. I should have asked. I should have pressed. But I convinced myself she would speak when she was ready. The truth is, I had my own ghosts tugging at my sleeves. For years, I had carried a secret I promised myself I would eventually tell her. A truth about her mother, about the cracks in our marriage long before the divorce, about the one mistake I hoped would never find its way back into daylight. I told myself silence protected her. In reality, silence protected me. As the days stretched into weeks, I noticed subtle shifts, missed calls, delayed replies, conversations that skimmed the surface as if she were afraid of diving deeper. Daniel's voice sometimes echoed in the background, sharp and impatient, before she hurried off the phone. I sensed she was drifting toward something dangerous, but without evidence, I hesitated to interfere. I didn't want to become the kind of parent who mistook worry for control. Still, I kept the porch light on every evening. A small, silent offering, just in case she ever needed a place to land. The night everything changed, the house felt unusually still. Even the wind outside seemed to hold its breath. I had fallen asleep on the couch, an old habit whenever my mind refused to quiet. When that faint noise brushed against the edge of my dreams, I assumed it was another restless thought demanding attention. But it wasn't, and I realized, too late, that the quiet had only been a warning. I didn't know then that the axe they carried wasn't the danger. It was merely the symbol of something far older, far heavier, lurking in the shadows behind them. By the time I stood from the couch and moved toward the door, the boundary between the life I knew and the truth I had avoided was already beginning to dissolve. I stood in the narrow hallway, every instinct urging me to step back, yet something heavier held me in place. The axe in Daniel's hand wasn't raised, but its presence alone split the air between us like a silent threat. My daughter, Lily, kept glancing from him to me, her eyes wide with something I couldn't name. Fear, guilt, desperation? I couldn't tell, and that uncertainty only deepened the knot tightening in my chest. "Mom, we need to talk," she finally said, her voice trembling just enough to betray her resolve. Daniel shifted, the blade catching the weak hallway light. It wasn't aimed at me, but it wasn't pointed away either. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to breathe steadily. The cold floor under my feet grounded me, reminding me that this moment was real, not a half-formed nightmare. "About what?" I asked, keeping my voice calm though my pulse hammered in my ears. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It carried the weight of something long buried, a truth pressing against the edges of the moment, threatening to break free. Lily looked down at her hands, clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Daniel stared at the floor as if ashamed to meet my eyes. "We couldn't call first," Lily whispered. "You wouldn't have believed us." A strange, electric unease rippled through me. The last time we spoke months ago, our conversation had ended abruptly. Cold words, strained emotions, and a subtle distance I never fully understood. Now they were here, in the middle of the night, holding an axe like it was both a burden and a shield. "Tell me what's happening," I said, my voice firmer this time. "I'm not playing guessing games." Daniel finally looked up, his face tight with something darker than fear, resolve. "Someone followed us here," he said. "We didn't bring this," he lifted the axe slightly, "to scare you. We brought it because we didn't know how else to protect ourselves." A flicker of disbelief crossed my mind, but it died quickly. His tone didn't match theatrics or paranoia. It carried the weight of someone cornered. "Who?" I asked. Lily stepped closer, her voice so soft I had to strain to catch it. "The person who's been threatening us. The person who knows things about our family, things you never told me." Her words hit like a sudden rush of cold air. There were few secrets I'd kept from her, but the ones I did were buried deep, pieces of a past I hoped would never surface. The house felt smaller suddenly, the walls closing in as if urging me to confront what I had spent years avoiding. A faint sound echoed from outside, something scraping lightly against the siding, and all three of us froze. The night, it seemed, wasn't done with us. And for the first time, I wondered if the truth they carried was far more dangerous than the axe in Daniel's hands. I stood frozen, my back pressed against the cold wall as the living room filled with a thick, disorienting silence. My daughter placed the axe gently on the coffee table, as if setting down something sacred rather than something lethal. Her eyes shimmered with a grief I had never seen, and for the first time since the night began, I sensed that the danger in this house wasn't the weapon. It was the truth she was about to release. "Mom," she began, her voice trembling but determined. "You deserve to know everything." Her husband shifted beside her, his face tight with guilt, as though he had rehearsed this moment 100 times yet still wasn't prepared for it. My heartbeat hammered, fear, resentment, and curiosity all clashing inside me. My daughter inhaled deeply. "We didn't come here to hurt you. We came because we found something." She reached into her coat and pulled out a crumpled manila envelope, one I recognized instantly. It had belonged to her father, my husband, who died years earlier. I had kept some of his belongings tucked away, believing they were harmless remnants of a life cut short. But she held it like it contained a confession. "I was cleaning the attic," she continued, "and I found letters. Dozens of them. Written to a woman I've never heard of. Someone he called." Her voice broke, and she showed me the envelope's contents, faded pages, brittle with age. The name Elena appeared in ink that had bled at the edges, as though even time couldn't wash it away. I felt my breath leave me. The world tilted. My husband and I had our flaws, our arguments, but infidelity was never something I allowed myself to imagine. I had built an entire history on trust, unaware that pieces of it were rotting beneath my feet. "He wasn't faithful to you," my daughter whispered, "and he wasn't faithful to us either. This woman, she wrote about money he promised her. Money that came from your joint account." Her husband added quietly. "And the axe, it belonged to him too. She wrote about the night he came to her house with it. She said he wasn't himself." The implications twisted through me like a storm. My husband, gentle, soft-spoken, steady, had lived a life I never glimpsed. A stranger sharing my bed, raising my daughter, smiling across candlelit dinners while hiding entire chapters from me. My daughter took a step closer. We brought the axe because we thought you should see everything. Because you always told me that truth, no matter how painful, is better than a beautiful lie. My legs weakened, but not from fear, rather from the weight of understanding. My family hadn't come to harm me. They had come to free me. And now there was no turning back. The rest of the night unfolded with a strange, unsettling clarity, as though every moment was determined to leave an imprint I could never erase. After their confession, the house felt heavier, thick with truths we had tiptoed around for years. My daughter sat on the edge of the couch, her hands trembling despite the steadiness in her voice. Her husband hovered nearby, unsure whether to comfort her or keep his distance. I watched them both, realizing with sharp regret how many details I had missed, how many warning signs had been smoothed over with excuses. They had come to me because they believed I was the only person left who could help them, the only one who knew the threads of our family history well enough to understand what was happening. And yet, even now, they weren't telling me everything. There was more beneath the surface, layers of fear, resentment, and guilt they hadn't dared to articulate. I could sense it in the pauses between their words, in the way their eyes skirted mine whenever the conversation pressed too close to something raw. I asked them gently what they planned to do next. My daughter's gaze flicked toward the window, where the glass still vibrated faintly from the storm outside. She admitted they hadn't thought that far ahead. They had been running on instinct, driven by panic and desperation rather than reason. The axe, still leaning against the wall, was a symbol of that desperation, a tool chosen not for violence, but for protection against the chaos they no longer trusted themselves to navigate. As she spoke, I felt an ache settle into my chest. She had always been the resilient one, the child who pushed forward even when the world pressed back. Seeing her unravel now, seeing her husband's quiet helplessness, forced me to confront a truth I had avoided. They were carrying the weight of my past mistakes as much as their own present crisis. And the cost of that weight was beginning to erode them. I told them they couldn't stay here without a plan. Whatever danger they feared, whatever betrayal they were still circling around, they would have to face it with clarity, not panic. My daughter nodded, though reluctance flickered in her eyes. She was afraid of the next step, afraid of the truth that waited once she stopped running. Still, she agreed to speak plainly, to bring everything into the open. But before she could begin, a sound echoed through the house, soft, deliberate, unmistakably close. We froze, each of us turning toward the hallway as though pulled by the same invisible thread. The storm outside had quieted, leaving the interior silence sharp enough to feel. The sound came again, a slow creak that didn't belong to wind or settling wood. My daughter's hand drifted toward the axe. Her husband straightened, tension rippling through him. I rose slowly, every part of me bracing. Whatever truth they had been preparing to share, something or someone, had arrived to force it into the open. And this time we would face it together.